morning. Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. On the program this morning, we'll be talking with Vicki Olin. She's a Republican commissioner from the Steuben County Board of Elections. It is early primary voting currently. We're going to talk about what that means for you, if it affects you. We'll also talk about some of the important deadlines coming up and what to be prepared for November. I know it's only June, but you got to start thinking about it, folks. We got to take these elections seriously. All right, this is tying in, and yeah, we're hitting the ground running this morning. That's how much we have to cover. By all means, you can always contact me. Before I forget, I want to put that up on the screen. That is information to reach out to me if you want to ask Vicki any questions, or if you have any comments, suggestions for me. That's the best way to reach me. Okay. This ties in something we were talking about yesterday and Friday. Pardon me. You know, a couple weeks ago, we had that article where they suggested there's just not enough research that's been done. We're not sure if social media is good, bad, and different for young people. And that raised a lot of red flags. I think we all know it has not been a positive on young people or adults. This proves what we've been talking about, and it's an overall larger picture. I don't want to be doom and gloom on the program, but we talk about that loss of faith. We talk about that loss of faith in the community. And all these things tie together to create this sort of depression that apparently we are experiencing. It's the new Great Depression, writes the New York Post. Since the rise of social media, depression and feelings of hopelessness have skyrocketed among teens. Nearly half of teens say they agree with phrases like, "I can't do anything right," "I do not enjoy life," and "my life is not useful." Roughly twice as many feel that way as just a decade ago. Dr. Jean Twenge said these are staggering numbers, just enormous increases, and parents are rightfully very concerned about their child's mental health. The poll conducted by the University of Michigan, and it's a part of this Dr. Twenge's new book, is just the latest revelation about youth mental health as rates of teen anxiety and depression have grown. We talked about people's addiction to Adderall. All these things sadly tie in together. The number one cause, according to the doctor, Dr. Twenge, is social media and screen time. In fact, rates of teen depressive symptoms have increased massively since the mass popularization of the smartphone in early 2010. Look at those numbers up on your screen. Look at that chart. The University of Michigan poll had been conducted annually since 1991, with 50,000 students in 8th, 10th, and 12th grades nationwide asked if they agree with the statements, and you heard me say my life is not useful, I can't do anything right. While the number held pretty steady until about 2012, they began a sharp ascent the next year. Until then, fewer than 20% of students said they agreed with the phrase, "I do not enjoy my life." Now, half do. Half agree with that. "I do not enjoy my life." And if you look at the timing on this, it coincides with the rise of platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, etc. TikTok, we may not quite be seeing the effects of that even yet. Today, teens can spend up to 9 hours a day glued to their screens, and half of them say they are online almost constantly. Wow. This cannot be healthy. Earlier in this year, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy warned that teen depression and suicide are on the rise in the social media age. And while both boys and girls are struggling, it's a trend that seems to hit girls harder. If you look at some of those just very troubling poll numbers and the rate increase in suicidal thoughts, it all ties in with this kind of body image idea the social media pushes. Or you've got to remember, you're in your own bubble, and it looks like when you post something on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, Snapchat, you're not putting out, "Oh, today was a bad day. Look, it rained. I didn't do anything." No, you're putting out the highlights. So now when I go to check, everybody's life seems to be like a quote unquote highlight, at least of that day, if not of the month or the week, however the person is posting. So that weighs on so many people. And you've got to tie in with, the pandemic. I remember, and I'm going to take that off the screen for now. I remember just anecdotally, you'd go and you'd say, man, life's been upended. I'm not doing anything. You'd go on social media and there'd be people, still doing things they probably weren't supposed to do, going out and doing those type of things. And you thought, wow, that can weigh on you. Now imagine being a young person and you're dealing with, popularity in school and the things that are important to these young people, and you tie that in with social media. It's very, very troubling. It's not the only topic we're going to be talking about this morning, and I know I'm already running a little late, but again, this is just painting out an overall picture like we talked about yesterday and what we talked about Friday in these troubling statistics. So let's take a short break. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street for WYDC TV, Big Fox. Big story from the last few days here, specifically yesterday, was China and the United States meeting. Blinken attempting to stabilize the U.S.-China relations. I'm not sure. There's a couple of various pieces on this that I found fascinating. We're going to get to them in just a second. But the New York Post saying all we're doing now is appeasement. But before I get into that, I don't want to, give you all the information from the New York Post until we look at a little bit what happened yesterday. They welcomed both the Chinese president and Blinken welcomed progress after shaking hands with each other at the Great Hall of the People. China refused to entertain Washington's bid to resume military-to-military communication channels, citing U.S. sanctions as the obstacle. That was kind of a big takeaway. Secretary of State Blinken actually said it was an important start in stabilizing that relationship. So they asked him about the spy balloons, or numerous instances of spying, as we talked about, I think, late last week, about the Cuba base that China has looking to spy on us. So you can tie a lot of these things together. So they asked him, they said, what about the spy balloon? Blinken said the chapter should be closed. That's it. The chapter should be closed. Does that mean anything was done about it? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth if we have a chance. Stopping the downward spiral in relations between the world's two largest economies, quote, is not the product of one visit, even as intense and in some ways productive that was. That's a weird way of putting it, isn't it? Intense and somewhat productive. But it's a good and I think important start. Blinken also said it is not in our interest, the United States' interest, to decouple from China. Now, you know my thoughts on this, I believe, and there's somebody else who wrote a piece on it. I've been talking about it for quite a while, but Daniel McCarthy saying China is muscling into power across America's underbelly. This kind of idea that they see an opening that they want to exploit to become a world superpower, take over as the world superpower. So Blinken saying it is not in our interest to decouple from China. Okay. After his meeting with the Chinese president, Blinken reiterated that the administration is not about decoupling from China. Instead, they are about de-risking and diversifying. And, well, there's so many various avenues we can go down with this, but there's so much money, and that's why you see this sort of appeasement. And that's how the New York Post editorial board put it, which I'm going to talk about when we come back. We do have a few things here if we have an opportunity to talk about the former president, Donald Trump, what he had to say in that interview with Fox News yesterday. We've got a few things here about Biden's administration and his campaign. So please stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We were talking about Blinken meeting with Chinese President Xi. Here's the take on it from the New York Post, calling it outright appeasement. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the White House claimed to be pleased by his trip to Beijing. President Xi Jinping actually met with him and agreed to continue talking. Thing is, it seems China will only accept this continued conversation as long as Washington keeps appeasing it with actual concessions. This piece by the New York Post editorial board goes through, it's actually kind of shocking to see how much that we did appease China. Crucially, Washington had to bribe Beijing to even get this meeting. It has played down Beijing's intensifying intelligence gathering, the Cuba spy base, as I mentioned, the spy balloon, China's secret police station inside our country. I forgot to even mention that one. And is delaying the declassifying of intelligence on COVID's origin. It's also stalling planned restrictions on investments in China linked to its defense industry and on export of U.S. semiconductor technology that could boost Beijing's military. So again, I'm not going to go through each and every individual piece of this article. That's for you to find at the New York Post and check out for yourself. But during the visit, Blinken gave Beijing a free pass on the balloon, saying that chapter should be closed. What? President Joe Biden himself said the balloon was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spying equipment. Suddenly it doesn't matter anymore. Just because Blinken told the Chinese we didn't like it, so he just went there and said, we don't really like that. So it's over. He also handed China a subtle gift in his statement on Taiwan, insisting, quote, "We do not support Taiwan's independence." Even amid tougher talk and a plea to preserve the status quo, that's a huge and dangerous concession. There's also the mystery that Xi announced the 2 sides had reached agreement on some specific issues before telling Blinken he hopes, quote, "you will make more positive contributions to stabilizing China-U.S. relations." More positive contributions. Does this look one-sided to you? Now, Washington is mum. Biden, the administration is quiet on any specific agreements that were made. So what did Blinken promise is the question that the Post editorial board asks. What this is, and you got to go back to the spy balloon, the coronavirus origins. Our leaders are more anxious to keep the American public in the dark than to hold Beijing to account. And a lot of that has to do with how much money is involved. A lot of politicians aren't willing to take this fight. It's appeasement and it's wrong. The question is, how much will they give away just so they can enjoy more, quote, diplomacy? And as I mentioned, Daniel McCarthy has the piece saying that China is muscling into power across America's underbelly. And it's a really good piece. I can't go through all of it because it's very specific on geography. But just because we were having that conversation about this larger picture with China, you may want to check that out for yourself. Now, the former president, Donald Trump, was on Fox News Channel yesterday on Special Report. You may have heard about that. We're going to talk a little bit about it if we have an opportunity. But Bret Baier asked, should Taiwan be independent? So the former president said, if I tell you an answer, it's going to hurt me in negotiations on the assumption that I win. But I have a very good relationship with the president. After COVID came in, I sort of didn't want the relationship, and I sort of ended that relationship. So Bret Baier said, but if China invaded Taiwan, would you go to war to defend Taiwan? Trump responded, I don't want to say that because that hurts me in negotiations with regards to President Xi. Now, he knows what I'll do. And by the way, for 4 years, they didn't invade Taiwan, and they never even talked about it. You'll find very few discussions about it. That's pretty interesting. I know he also weighed in on Ukraine, kind of the same mindset. I thought I'd mention that because that is a pretty big interview. And as I said, I may have an opportunity to talk a little bit about it. Please feel free to weigh in. I'm going to see if we can get Vicki Olin on the Zoom here in just a moment. So please stay with us. That's the best way to contact me if you have any questions for Vicki Olin. She's Republican Commissioner for the Board of Elections in Steuben County. So you can contact me or just contact me in general about the topics of the day. All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. I'm having technical difficulties, but we get kind of the point because this is Vicki Olin. Thanks so much for being on the program this morning.
Sure.
All right. We have not a ton of stuff to go through, but let's a couple quick things. A lot of people, I think, haven't experienced the early voting yet, and I know that's going on now with primary. Could you tell us what you can expect if you're looking to early vote?
Early voting is basically it's basically the same as going to your poll site on election day and voting. When you come in, the voters are gonna, ask for your date of birth. They're gonna check you in, and then we have what's called ballot on demand printing. So it will print off your ballot, and you will get a ballot just like you would. It's the same ballot you would get on election day when you go to your poll site and vote. Um, it it makes it easier a little bit because people have 9 days to go out and do early voting instead of just one day. So people that, you know, work like strange hours
Mm-hmm.
and doctors and different things like that. And some people, it's just easier for them to go on a Saturday when they're out running their errands. Um, for this election, we only have early voting in Bath at the Annex building because we don't have a countywide election.
Okay.
We only have 7 towns that are having Republican primaries for this election. So, but for the general election, we'll have early voting in Corning, Cornell, and Bath
Okay.
for 9 straight days before the election. So people can come out on the weekend, they can come out during the day, during the week, and they can vote. And they're still going to scan their ballot on a machine if they're eligible to vote on a machine on election day. And then they're done. Election results, we don't run any reports. We don't do anything until after 9 o'clock on election day when the polls are closed.
Okay.
And then those results are added in with election day results, and everything is reported election night. It's just a lot more flexibility for people to come out and vote.
Have you found it to be a success, or is it still kind of getting the implementation in all of this?
I think it's still a lot of change.
Mhm.
For the presidential, when we had that, we had a huge turnout. I mean,
Sure.
it was way larger than we ever thought we would have. This election, not so much, but like I said, we only have 7 towns and it's only Republican primary. The general election, I think people are kind of getting the hang of, maybe coming out and voting early. Some people are still kind of, I'm just going to go to my poll site and vote on election day. And they have that right, and they can do either. It's basically an option for them, and we're there for them to come out and vote if they want to come out and vote early and be done with it.
If anybody's tuning in for the first time, I understand that Zoom looks kind of wild right now, but I think it works here. So I just wanted to let people know that I am aware of it. That there's 4 of us, I think, right now in a box with just 2 people being interviewed, but that's the way it goes. So when there's the New York State budget season or the sessions, and are you nervous because it seems like they're constantly changing voting rules?
Since the end of 2019, we have had over 140 law changes.
Wow.
And that was when I just finally quit counting.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many they have changed so far this year. And every time they change a law, it's a domino effect for everything that we do in the office.
Sure.
Because when they changed the law, like the absentee law, when they changed that and said, oh, okay, now you've issued them a ballot, they no longer can vote on the voting machine. They have to vote affidavit if they show up at the poll site.
Right.
So when they change that law, it's educating the voter, it's educating the election inspectors, it's changing the process of how we do everything in the office. And it's just a lot of different changes, and you have to stay on top of them continually.
Do they send somebody to kind of explain it, or how do you learn about it? Is it constant emails? I mean, because I don't know how you could keep up with the legislature just throwing stuff at you, and because we don't know what's in bills half the time. I think half the time the people elected don't know what are in the bills that they're voting for.
No, it is a lot of emails, and thankfully the state board of elections is very good at trying to make sure that we are kind of on top of some of the bills that are like moving and that are out there. There are some different like commissioners that are very good at reading the bills and kind of being on top of things and
Sure.
keeping us informed. We have a lot of like Zoom calls, caucus calls with the state board. And then there's always when they pass it, so what's in it and how do we apply it and how do we make it work and what do we do? And And that's a lot of conversation and a lot of trying to just figure it out sometimes by trial and error.
Well, it's interesting too because at a time when they're trying to make it easier for people to vote, like you see with the early voting, this almost adds a confusion that you're nervous that people might say throw their hands up essentially.
Yeah, I'm really a little worried about the one that they've just passed where they're trying to push the local elections in with, an even year, which means they would
Yeah.
happen the same time as a presidential or a governor's race. And I mean, when you take this year's ballot, we have over 200 offices up this year, on an odd
Yeah.
year. And then next year you have the presidential, and then you've got Congress and Senate and Assembly, and then all of the other things that are, and for us, like sheriff is up next year.
Right.
And so you add this ballot on top of that ballot. And so I'm thinking we're looking at possibly 2-page ballots. And are people just going to, like start filling out their ballot and they're going to be like, oh, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And not even go on to the second page. And I'm worried about like those kind of things. And I think that when they say like, oh, it's, going to be, cost savings for the counties. Well, it's not, because right now, because it's a constitutional law,
Mm-hmm.
that county clerk and district attorney and judges all have to remain on an odd year. So
Right.
we're still going to have to run a countywide election on the years when there isn't any other local stuff up.
Well, and that really makes no sense when you think about it because, they're saying it's about keeping it local and focus on local, but all the local issues are going to be completely erased. No one's going to be talking about that. They're going to be talking about whatever, governor, president.
Yeah, and we all know that like when we have a presidential year, a governor year, even Congress, Senate, and Assembly, I mean, the amount of stuff we're getting in the mail, the phone
Yes.
calls that we're getting, the robocalls, all of that stuff, and by the time the election gets here, people are just so tired of all of it that it's really a problem.
I just fixed our problem almost as
I
the
see
interview. So
that.
as the interview's nearly over, and I finally figured out how to fix it. I apologize about that. But how would that even work? I'm guessing you don't have the answer. So if it goes to even years, does that mean you're already shaking your head? You don't have the answer. Would someone have less of a term, or I don't know how that would work for the individual.
Yeah, some of them are going to have a shortened term.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be like instead of having a 4-year term, they're going to end up having a 3-year term, and then they're going to have to run again. And so that in itself is going to be, I'm not even sure.
It sounds like it's a nightmare just to be a nightmare. I don't really see the bonus in this because, like you said, it's not saving us any money.
No.
Wow.
If we have to run a countywide election and you only have 2 positions on the ballot, what is your voter turnout going to be?
Right.
I mean, it's just not, and which also means that we also have to have 3 early voting sites, which that requires, you think 9 days,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have at least 4 election inspectors there to man each site. So that's three sites for 9 days and 4 election inspectors for each day. And so that's a huge cost.
Yeah. Are you having trouble finding people to volunteer on election day?
We sent out some mailings last year, and we actually had quite a few people step up. I think some people aren't sure like how to actually become an election inspector.
Sure.
And a lot of people think that it is a volunteer thing, but we do pay them. We do pay them to come and take the training, and they do have to be trained. There is a lot that they have to do in order, to make everything work. A lot of people think, oh, they're just sitting there checking me in. They're not, but there's a lot of legal things that they have to make sure they're doing correctly and following the law and the training. And it is a long day.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about it. They're required to be at the poll site like at 5:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
And they're there until 9:30, 9:45 at night. So we have had, a lot of people step up, and hopefully we will, we'll send out some more mailings in the areas where we're really short,
Mm-hmm.
and we can get some more people to, kind of step up. And if we can get enough inspectors, we can actually maybe offer them split shifts. So
which would be
One
nice.
can work in the morning and
Yeah.
one can work in the evening, and they're not having to work a 16, 17-hour day.
What's the bare minimum that you need to have
By law, we're required to have 2 Democrats and 2 Republican inspectors for every district.
Wow. That seems almost like it would be impossible to find that many people because there's so many districts.
I mean, there is, and recently we just redistricted,
Yeah.
which that has been a little bit of, people are not overly thrilled when you change things.
Right.
And so we redistricted because they changed the law and they said we can put 2,000 registered voters in a district.
Okay.
And so we went through and redistricted. So basically, like Corning Town, for example, you had 5 districts before.
Okay.
And 3 poll sites. So 2 poll sites actually had 2 districts in them, which meant 2 tables,
Right.
2 sets of ballots, 2 different sets of inspectors. And with redistricting, we consolidated it down to 3 districts. So each district is now in their own site,
Okay.
which means 1 ballot style, 1 check-in. When they come in, they don't have to worry about what table they're going to.
Right.
They're just going to go in, they can check in with any inspector that's available, and it'll be a much smoother process for them. So we redistrict some, so that should hopefully help.
Yeah.
And then, we're trying to do the best we can to make things easier for the voters and then more cost effective, because they do get charged back to the taxpayer.
I know it's a ways away. What's your typical election day like? You personally?
Personally,
Yeah.
I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Uh-huh.
and depending on the day and what's going on, I'm either heading straight into the office and the staff is all here by 5 o'clock in the morning,
Okay.
or there are times when I'm heading directly out to a poll site. If we're short-staffed, we don't have enough election inspectors, then staff is actually going out to the poll site and actually working as an election inspector.
Wow.
And I've done that a couple of times, all depending on, what's going on. Otherwise, on election day, we come in the office. We're here in case inspectors have a problem, like getting up and running in the morning. We're here to walk them through, take care of whatever we need to. If they have inspectors that don't show up, then we can send staff out to help them out. And then we do a lot of site visits. We do a lot of phone calls, inspectors calling us. There's, questions on a voter. There's, an address change or something, and they're not sure how to, handle something. So we do a lot of phone calls with inspectors, poll sites. We try to go out and visit as many sites as we can to make sure things are, running smooth. And then, sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes the phone rings continually all
Sure.
day long. And then we wait for, polls to close at 9 o'clock, and then we start the process in the office, running results for the early voting, and then waiting for sheriff deputies to start bringing the bags and the results in so we can upload them. And we're normally here till around midnight or so before we finally get everything wrapped up and posted online, and so that we can head home.
So you've got it streamlined. I would have thought much past midnight, to be honest, because there's so much.
Yeah, but we're back here at 8 o'clock in the morning the next morning.
Right. Well, that's true too.
So yeah, and because we still have to certify, we still
Sure.
have a lot more that we have to do, but at least getting the the election day and early voting results up and posted on the website, that's pretty much the big thing, into the state board.
And I know we asked this at the beginning, but now that this is all fixed and the video looks good, there's Republican primaries. That's it, coming up on primary day, June 27th. But there is early voting. It's Addison, Bath, Campbell, Caton, Rathbone, Troopsburg, and Wayland. If someone does have any questions about how to early vote or whether they're registered, anything, what's the best way to reach you?
They can call us. They can call 607-664-2260. They can call 607-664-2240. They can also go on our website. It's steubencountyny.gov/BOE. And all of our early voting dates and times are posted on there. People can actually go on there and view their ballot before they go into the poll site and vote. A lot of our deadlines, offices that are up, are also posted on there. Absentee information is on there. All of your elected officials, they're also on there.
Right.
We really try to, keep everybody posted, and we are here. If anybody has questions or, they're not sure about something, call us. We're here to help you out and talk to you, or if you moved and you're not sure what poll site to go to, give us a holler. We'll get you where you need to be.
And if someone wants to run for office, do they contact you?
Yeah, they can. Or, if they're registered Republican, they can always reach out to the party chair for their party. They can call the office. We can help them out. We do have a lot of information on our website about running for election, depending on whether they petition, if they're, or their town caucuses or whatever happens. But yeah, we're here to help them out and do whatever we can.
So contact you about early voting if they want to run and if they want to be an election inspector.
Yep, that's all part of the job.
Well, Vicki, thanks so much for being on the program. Sorry I had the technical difficulty and I got you up so early for it, but I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, let's do it again soon, okay?
Will do. Thanks, Frank.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Sorry about the little bit of technical difficulty, and I'm so glad that Vicki could be on the program because there's obviously so much to cover when it comes to election season. I'm thinking my audio's okay. And I know this is kind of a weird time to be talking about it in a way, but with the early primary voting, I thought it was a good opportunity for us to sit down with Vicki and say, okay, what should we know? What do we need to know? And that's why I added at the end. I think it's very important. If you want to run for something, you either contact, for instance, Sarah Lattin from Chemung County. She's a Republican chairperson. Or Joe Sempolinski, the Republican chairperson of Steuben County. Talk with them at first. Get the idea. See what they think. Pick their brains. That's if you're Republicans. You can find your Democrat counterparts as well. Sorry about that. Okay, I saw that my microphone was broken there for a second. As I was saying, I saw someone send a question in for Vicki. I apologize. I didn't see it till after. As you could tell, we're having some issues with the Zoom, but we finally got it figured out. But that's why I didn't get to check my messages right before we went on the air. But I do appreciate that. We'll have Vicki on again soon. So I always appreciate when you contact me. Okay, let's get back to some of the issues of the day. The former president, Donald Trump, claims he didn't show off the secret Iran attack plan and says he actually rustled newspaper articles on tape. That's coming from the New York Post, and that was with his interview with Bret Baier yesterday. There's no document there. There was a newspaper article. They were copies of articles in magazines. There was no documents there. He also said that the reason he didn't hand over some of the boxes is it had personal effects of his, like clothing. Now, depending on what outlet you go to, Rolling Stones, which is a far left magazine, but they had the, I think, slanted or biased headline of Trump all but confesses to mishandling classified documents on Fox News. I don't know if that's really the way to put that. Or how about this one from none other than CNN? Trump offers dizzying new justification for classified documents as former cabinet secretaries sound the alarm. It is kind of interesting when they go back to all the people that were in the Trump administration that are not fans of Trump. They always go to that person for a quote, and we're supposed to act shocked that they still don't like Trump. And then you start to hear the rumor mill, as we've talked about in the past, which is 2024 presidential rivals quietly start to consider a GOP primary without Trump. Now he's interviewed people, with knowledge close to the source or anonymity. And okay. Now, the former president, Donald Trump, did say that he thought Bill Barr was a coward. Barr was a coward. People that you name, for every person you named, I can name 20 people that love the administration and maybe more. Importantly, the voters love the administration. The voters are dying to get back to it, Brett. The voters are tired of being laughed at all over the world. We are run by a fool. We are run by a man that doesn't have a clue. Alan Dershowitz, Trump's former lawyer, I interviewed him a couple times in the years past. He's a nice guy. If you don't know anything about Alan Dershowitz, he was a Democrat. Then he didn't really defend Hillary far enough. Anyway, they all kind of turned on him, and he's had some back and forth, but the interviews were always very informative. He said that the indictment against President Trump is the worst case I've seen in 60 years. Now, Donald, the effort is just to get him. This is Alan Dershowitz. New York is the worst case I've seen in 60 years of law. Nothing to it under the law or under the fact. As to Florida, search hard enough, you can find evidence against anybody. I've seen stuffed fish on a plaque which says I'd still be swimming if I only kept my mouth shut. In Biden's home state, Delaware, an outrage. They appoint judges who return to practice and favor local people. There should be some sniffing around. Delaware's justice system is not a justice system trusted to do equal justice. So that's Alan Dershowitz. Also in the interview, it wasn't just about the court cases, indictment. President Trump saying that Jared and Ivanka won't be in the administration if he wins. Enough with the family, he said, because it's just too tough for them. And that's happening now. Ron DeSantis' wife is experiencing that a little bit as well, how when you're conservative, they are going to go after your family. Fox News has a very good piece. Knives out for Casey DeSantis as wife of Florida governor. Top Trump rival becomes media's latest target. So that's essentially what the former president, Donald Trump, was saying. No, I'm not enough for the family, you know. It's too painful for the family. My family's been through hell. Then he goes to describe some of the ways that they've been mistreated. So when we come back, we're going to wrap things up. I know I'm moving fast. Whew. We had that little bit of technical difficulty, so it felt good to talk with Vicki Olin and catch up. But I feel we got a lot of catching up to do right here on Frankly Speaking. I do want to thank Vicki Olin for being a part of the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program and giving us all that time for an interview. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Just to highlight that article that I was talking about before break, knives are out for Casey DeSantis. It's not unusual for the spouses of prominent politicians to receive media scrutiny, but it is that for there to be such hostility in this case towards one, and that is Casey DeSantis. And they go through this article of Fox News just showing some of this. Well, they called her, I think it was Politico. Was it Politico? They called her, oh no, it was the Daily Beast, left-wing Daily Beast, called her a Walmart Melania. Casey DeSantis' coat is just like her husband Ron DeSantis' campaign. Crude, grasping, saying the ugly part out loud, whereas Trump would wink wink to the fascists. DeSantis wants to peel off Trump's base by being even more explicit about who he intends to target. You can see it right down to his wife's jacket. DeSantis' Florida is where the woke go to die, and a lot of people die as well. I mentioned that piece. Well, you would never see this, Jill Biden go through this. You would never see the wife of a prominent Democrat go through these type of vicious attacks. But I think DeSantis knows, just like he saw what Trump went through, that if you're going to jump in the fray, if you're going to jump in, they're going to go after you. Now, there's a piece about why Robert Kennedy Jr.'s 2024 bid is a headache for Biden. I received a message earlier. Yes, he was censored recently. They took down one of his posts on YouTube about vaccines. But he's doing, the polls are at 20. It's got Biden and his people concerned. That's why there's a piece, boy, I'm almost out of time here, from Liz Peek. And this is what we'll wrap up our program on. 5 signs Biden's campaign has Democrats in full panic mode. Number 1, the DNC called in its big media buddies to attack and trash Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a long shot candidate vying for the Democrat nomination. I'm going to go through these quick and not give all the specifics. Number 2, again, this is Liz Peek at Fox News. You can find it yourself. Number 2, the challenger might be Gavin Newsom. Yeah, why is he out giving interviews to Hannity? He looks like a man that is campaigning. Number 3, Democrats are waging a hot war against no labels, a centrist group aiming to put forward a slate of moderate candidates, one Democrat and one Republican. You may have seen that piece. Former Congressman Tom Reed did a piece on that not that long ago, suggesting that maybe it's a Joe Manchin, Nikki Haley. I'm not a big believer in that. I don't know how that's successful, but the fact that Democrats are attacking that group shows that there's some concern there. 4th, in times of stress, who do they haul out? Former President Barack Obama. He becomes the popular head of the Democrat Party, essentially, to prop up Biden's sagging fortune. He went after Tim Scott to protect Biden. And finally, there is the campaign, which is faltering. Even the supportive Washington Post called Biden's effort today a slow walk to re-election. He's yet to rent out office space for campaign, hasn't hired a full staff, and even more troubling for the candidate, not raised much money. That's a good piece by Liz Peek. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Yes, the Assembly is returning to Albany today. We'll find out tomorrow, next few days, what exactly to expect or what is being done in those 2 days. Thank you to Vicki Olin, the Republican Commissioner for the Steuben County Board of Elections. We appreciate her taking so much time, even though we had a couple technical difficulties. That was on my end, so I do appreciate her being a part of the program. I hope that you will tune in tomorrow morning, starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking. Let me put my contact information up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms about today's program, or just want to weigh in on something we discussed, I would love to hear from you. So that's it for this morning. Man, that went fast. Well, it's a great way to start your morning. All these kids are about to be out of school, and they keep talking about brain drain. I think you should have the kids sit down in front of TV starting at 7 a.m. every weekday morning with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. Hi, I'm Frank Acom. Thanks for checking out our YouTube page. We'll be uploading each edition of Frankly Speaking 1 week after the original air date. So, let me remind you to watch the live version of Frankly Speaking, weekday mornings starting at 7, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox.